everybody, this is Mike Riker. Welcome to Top of the Hops, and joining me today is one of my very good friends and a very versatile person. This guy's, he's wrestled, he has done podcasting, he's done announcing. Look at that beard. He's done some great things with his beard, and he also does some great work with people who have disabilities. I want to get into that. He's my friend. Thank you, Ken Reedy. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me, and cheers to you.
Yes, cheers to you. So let's start there. What are you drinking today?
I'm actually drinking. Well, I had to, I was feeling a little NWO-ish today. You can't see it, but I have an NWO Hollywood Hogan shirt on. I
Nice.
was like, let's go with the skull glass.
Oh,
And
cool.
even though I know Austin's got the lock on the skulls, but the Hogan shirt I got on's got a little skull, so I was like, let's go with the skull motif. But I'm drinking bourbon. I've been into like bourbons and whiskeys and stuff lately. Interesting, and this is a little trick we can share with your audience. So it's actually Evans bourbon, which is a fairly affordable bourbon. What you can do to kind of up the quality, and you can find these on Amazon. They're called oak infused spirals. I think they're called something like that. It's something infused spirals, and you break off almost like a third of it.
Okay.
Pour your bourbon into a jar, and just drop the spiral in, and you leave it for like 6 weeks.
Really?
The
Okay.
longer you leave it, the more infused it'll get. But
Right.
6 weeks is really like the minimum you should let it age, and it gives a much like oakier, smoother kind of taste. So it kind of ups the quality of your bourbon without breaking the bank on a higher level bourbon. So Evans
Interesting.
bourbon with oak spirals.
Nice, nice. So for someone, I've never had bourbon. I'll be honest with you. I've been more of a vodka. Just recently, like I was telling Dave on my last show, Dave LaGreca, I didn't get into beer till maybe 5, 6 years ago.
Oh,
I was
really?
more of a vodka drinker. I really didn't get into bourbon or whiskey. For someone who is a novice like me, what would you suggest, like the first bourbon I should try?
It's a really good question. I really like Bullet bourbon.
Bullet. Okay.
That's usually my go-to when I'm out. Um, so yeah, I'd probably recommend Bullet.
Okay.
Evans isn't bad. I mean, for a more affordable bourbon, especially if you were like, hey, I just want to see if I like bourbon at all. Evans isn't bad, and it's really good when you age it with spirals.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd probably go with Bullet.
Okay. Cool. I have to look into that. Because like I said, I like to broaden my horizons a little bit. Like I said, I've been more into beer lately. And the beer I'm drinking is actually a brewery I was at with my wife Nicole this weekend. It's called Barrier. It's in Oceanside, Long Island, and their signature beer is a beer called Money. So it's an IPA. I'm an IPA guy. I know a lot of people don't like IPAs. I love IPAs. It's probably my favorite beer. What I like about this beer, it's very citrusy. It's a nice yellow color. It's very hoppy. But it's very smooth. It's at 7.5%, but it doesn't drink like a 7.5%.
Okay.
And it's something you can drink a couple of these and feel fine with it. So I'm more of like an IPA sour guy. When it comes to beer, Ken, is there something that you like to enjoy?
It's funny. It's funny that you ask. I mean, back in the day, I used to like a good Guinness.
Yeah,
But it's weird. Like the whole thing with Guinness is like, I mean, that drink's like a meal.
it
So
does. Yes.
yeah, it's always like when do I have a Guinness? Because it's like usually when I go out, I'm gonna have more than one. I don't like if you have Guinness with food, you
Very
feel like
heavy.
yeah.
Yes.
So it's funny. I do, which is not a great beer, but on a like cold day, just an ice cold Coors Light is like
Yeah.
I do like that. It's got to be like ice cold. But
I think most beers has to be cold.
yeah.
Even some of the great beers, the craft beers, and even if it's lukewarm, it's not going to taste well.
Yeah, but I generally like I'll go towards a lot of the blondes. I'm a
Yes.
lighter beer kind of guy. It's actually funny so I have to recommend the IPA to my girlfriend Michelle, who of course you know.
Yes.
But the funny thing, she loves IPAs.
Okay.
And you talk about let's really blow up the show. Let's talk about gender roles. Let's get really but the funniest thing, man, is like whenever we go out for drinks, if we're getting beer, always the server will come over and put the IPA in front of me and the lighter beer in front
in
of
front of
Michelle.
her.
Like
Right.
I'm saying like 99% of the time, because nowadays in restaurants you usually have there's your wait staff, but then there's like servers.
Right.
So they always come over and they always assume the guy has got to be getting the darker beer and the woman has got to be getting the lighter one. And we're always just like, yep.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny when you said Coors Light. No, I wasn't a big Coors Light fan, but there was a weekend we spent with you guys when we went rafting. You brought a bunch of Coors Light on the raft. I think I might have had half a dozen.
Yeah.
I didn't care, man. They were good, and I haven't had one since. But I'll be honest with you, for that type of beer, would it be? I'm not a Budweiser fan at all, but Coors Light, that did the job for me that day.
Yeah. We always joke like Coors Light is good for marathon drinking. You know, like
Right,
if
right,
you're gonna
yeah,
be
exactly.
out for like 2-3 hours and you want to have a couple beers, like you can drink a half dozen Coors Lights and drive home. You know, you stretch it out over time. The beer you're drinking, you can't drink those for like a couple hours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's true. But like I said, I didn't get into beer till late. So IPA has been the beer for me. Every time I go out to a brewery, those are the first ones I'm looking for are the IPAs. So and this is the best one because I've seen this barrier this money one at other. I actually had my first money one actually at a not a brewery but a bar actually out in Queens. This is the first time I ever had one of these, and I went to go look for them in Long Island. And every time I see Barry on the menu, I'm grabbing it. It's just like I said, it's very refreshing, very citrusy. And this to me is like the perfect IPA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So all right. So I talked about some of the stuff that you do. Tell everybody about the work that you're involved in because I think it's important that people know about this.
Thank you. Yeah, I am. Well, my career, I work with adults with disabilities. Right now, I for an agency called YAI, um, and I'm primarily in the adult world. So anyone
Mm.
with a disability that's literally like 20 years old and up. I got our Tarrytown program. I believe we have someone who's 95. So we literally have
Wow.
like all the ages. Right now, I'm the supervisor for curriculum and workforce development in the Hudson Valley. So I'm involved in the day services aspect of things as well as some residential stuff. And primarily what I've been trying to do, and I'm drafting you into the fold, is really after the pandemic. I got borderline obsessed with we have to do things differently.
Mm.
I felt like I had been in the field for almost 3 decades and we were doing the same shit.
Yeah.
And once I got this role as like a developing curriculum, like we got to try to do something different, something
Right.
new. And we don't have much of a budget for
Mm.
anything ever. We're a very underpaid field. Put in perspective, recently, New York State, we were advocating for an 8% cost of living increase, and the governor and the budget came back with a 4%.
Ugh.
So it's rough. We're
Yeah.
facing a staffing shortage, which makes it difficult to run new and interesting curriculums. But what wound up happening is the person that was our representative to our local chamber of commerce resigned, and my supervisor was, "Hey Ken, I think you'd be good at that."
Mm.
And
Okay.
which can
Okay.
happen often. Like if
Yeah.
we we need someone to do this. Here you go. But I took that as an opportunity to really start to develop a volunteerism program and really start to create new and interesting curriculums. So backtrack a little bit. Before that, I actually was able to get a multimedia curriculum going. So they do podcasting in that room. They
Okay.
do they're making a movie. They're making a zombie picture.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's
cool stuff.
great.
And this is where like you start formulating these ties with the community. So they're doing this movie. I was able to connect with a local filmmaker that I found on Facebook, and I was like, I'm just going to contact him. And I just said to him, I want the people we support, people with disabilities, to come and just meet a real filmmaker, get to pick your brain, ask questions, and to feel like they're in the same arena with, you know, a filmmaker. They're making a
Right.
film, you make films, like it's a confidence booster. And what wound up happening was we had this meeting. It was great. He took us through a scene in American Beauty and put it on mute and just talked storytelling with camera angles, like what
Okay.
they were telling, and you could tell what the scene was about without even listening to the dialogue
Wow, that's
as he was
interesting.
explaining the camera angles. But then the moment that like broke your heart, one of the, as we were leaving, filmmaker, his name's Josh. So Josh asked, does anyone have any questions? And one of the guys we brought with us said, how do we make a movie with people like us? They don't make movies with people like us.
Mm.
And it was like,
Yeah.
and but the good thing about that is that that hit Josh so hard that Josh is making a documentary film on us now.
Oh, that's tremendous.
So he's doing a documentary behind the scenes of the zombie pick, but he's also doing the whole field as a backdrop. And hopefully we'll have, we're trying to get the zombie picture done by the fall, and then we're looking to get a theater. We want to at least on the big screen once. So a theater to do
Right.
a big Hollywood opening. And then hopefully by the end of the year, beginning of next year, the documentary will be done, and he plans on shopping it to film festivals, and he's got some distribution connections. So we'll see where it goes. So
Oh, I'll
that's
keep my fingers crossed. That sounds amazing.
yeah, and we're really pumped. So I just started like really trying to access the community as much as I can. I wound up starting an entrepreneurialism program with people with disabilities at the program. We do have one woman now that is running her own Etsy store, which I don't know any program that is actually teaching that. And that's where I
Right.
got really fixated on. We got to stop teaching the same shit.
Yeah.
If the world is moving forward with technology, why are we not teaching people with disabilities?
Yeah, it's so smart, Ken.
I mean, and
And
maybe they don't get all of it, but we got to
right.
at least expose them to this stuff that's out there. When I started in the field, an Etsy store was not possible,
Right.
but now it is, and we should be exposing people with disabilities to these options. When I was starting in the field, bagging groceries may have been the top of the line as far as like getting a job. Now the world has changed, and you need to expose people with disabilities to a menu of different things. If they still pick bagging groceries, more power to them.
Sure.
That's their
Right.
choice. But you got to expose them to a myriad of choices. So through all this, I got someone actually yesterday. We got a professional dance teacher that came in and did the dance class with a group. I've had a bunch of CEOs. We had a copyright CEO come and teach the group about AI and chat GPT, because again, that's where the world is going. And all of us, like staff, we were learning at the same time, because I don't know a lot about AI. It's fascinating, but I
Yeah.
know
I'm
about this
lost.
much. Yeah, it's crazy. Oh, it's
Yeah.
crazy, dude.
I know.
It's
I can only imagine what's going to happen. Yeah, I am. I'm excited. I'll be joining you in September to come down and visit everybody and talk about the radio world of it. And
yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to meet everybody and share my insight with that. I can't wait.
Yeah, and then there's so, it's funny, every time we bring in a volunteer, um, after they're done, their response is always, so when can I come back?
Yeah.
So when like they wind up getting almost as much, if not more, out of it than the people with disabilities do, because it's and that's like that kindness thing that, like, you start to reciprocate it, and it's makes the world a better place. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a great journey. We hooked up with a market research firm that we did like a 4-month long curriculum teaching market research, which led to one of our individuals getting her own market research mentorship program. So which I wish I had, like, she literally
Yeah.
has a
Right.
market research team helping her with her business and everything. So I've just been like really fixated on upping the ante, doing things differently, showing the world, and hopefully like it continues to get out there. And I really do appreciate you letting me talk about it a little bit here,
Oh,
because we need
absolutely.
the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can they find information on that, Ken? What website?
Just YI.org.
Okay.
YI.org is our organization. You can check out our organization. There's a myriad of different organizations if you just want to look up the field. And to be honest with you, if you feel like tweeting the governor, We deserve we deserve a bigger chunk of the budget. So by all
Okay.
means,
I
tweet
I
your
will
little governor and
I'll be
advocate.
one of those people that'll be tweeting the governor. So I'm sure it won't be the first time I tweet the governor, but for different reasons. But yes, I will definitely do that for you.
Appreciate
So
that.
before we get into our top five, I do want you to talk about your best friend, Monty, because you talk about pets and dogs. I mean, they're special, and I just, we got a cat a year ago, and I was never a cat person. I didn't like cats. I was always a dog person. Now I'm in love with this cat. Like so it's like I can't get enough of this cat. But your dog is special, Ken, and talk about some of the stuff that he's done with you with YAI.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's taught me so much
Yeah,
about, kindness and the world and a lot of what I'm doing right now comes directly from just his influence on me. And I mean, he's a therapy dog, so he's a certified therapy dog. He does come to work with me often.
nice.
He is the mayor. He's absolutely the mayor
I can
there.
see that.
It really has gotten to a point that yeah, well, if I come to work without him, it's where's
Disappointed.
Monty? Oh,
Yeah.
by the way, good morning. And when I have him with me, it's oh my God, Monty. Hi, Ken. So I'm definitely like second class to Monty. But I'll tell you, like over the pandemic, we did a therapy visit to a women's prison,
Oh, wow.
and it was crazy, man. Like it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, let's go to a prison. It's such a good idea. We can do some good, blah. And then we get there and it's, they take your wallet, your cell phone, your keys, and they put it in the locker. And it's like all of a sudden it starts to set in like, holy shit, like I'm in prison. And then the door closes behind me. It's like, oh wow, like I'm in jail, and you're walking down this hallway and you can see the orange jumpsuits on either side. And it's like
Mm,
the reality starts like setting in. But like when they closed the door, I remember thinking that everyone who's in here, when they heard that sound, it was probably the worst day of their life. And every day after that was probably a tie.
yeah.
And we walk into this room, and Monty walks in, and all these women in the orange jumpsuits just light up. They're just smiling. Oh my God, can I pet it? And it's like, wow, like if we can, oh, like if humans could just be better, like if we
I
could just
know, I know.
spread a little kindness.
Yeah, just one look at that dog. I mean, and I've said this to Nicole, my wife. I said, you look at the pictures of Monty, you just look at his eyes, and you can just see the kindness and the soulfulness in his eyes just from pictures. And then when you see him up close, it melts your heart.
Yeah, it was just crazy. And that was a moment that really like, I mean, I'll tell you, I'll share with everybody, but I got back to the car. I cried like a baby. It
Mm,
was so impactful to me, like what a little bit of, because what did I do? I literally, I walked in. I mean, I know people say that's great what you did. And again, thanks for the compliments, but like I walked into this room with my dog just
right.
to share a little bit of kindness and for everything that all those women probably were going through. Like that was probably a really special hour for them.
Sure.
And it was just, wow, just a little bit of kindness, just added it into the world. What a difference it could be. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And that was a lot of when we, I guess we're a little backwards, but everything I've been doing at work, I look back on that moment during the pandemic, like, no, like I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm adding goodness to this world. If it kills me, if it ruffles some feathers, good, because those are the feathers that need to be ruffled.
Right.
And I'm just gonna keep pushing forward with it. So yeah, a lot of that is directly Monty's influence. And you're right. I can't tell you how many people tell me it's his eyes. Like you
Yeah.
look at his eyes and it's like, oh, there's something else going on back there.
Yeah. So
Sometimes it's like
it
he
looks
just
like you're
wants
looking
to
at
talk.
Yeah, it looks like you're looking at a human. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Thanks for sharing that, Ken. I just thought it was important that people know what you do. And like I said, I've always admired you with your work with that. And I just want people to know about that.
thank
So
you. I
thank you
appreciate
for
that.
sharing that. So when I first met you, you were the first intern for for Busted Open Radio. Not that we did much with you, unfortunately. I didn't know what to do with you. I was still new. I was trying to learn my position still. But we became friends, and one of the reasons why we became fast friends is because our love for Hulk Hogan. Now, listen, I'm not here to talk about what happened with Hulk and everything that's gone on since. I'm here to talk about Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, the guy who got me into wrestling.
Hmm.
Now, the first person that got me into wrestling was the Junkyard Dog. I was living in Louisiana, Mid South. I'm not talking JYD, grab them cakes. I'm talking JYD, another one bites dust, Mid South. That's the guy I was into. But when Hulk first came on the scene in WWF, to me, it took it to another level. What did it for you for Hulk Hogan? Was it WWF days? Was it during that time that you became a Hulkamaniac?
Well, primarily, it's funny you say that because the first guy that got me into wrestling was actually Jimmy Snuka.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I remember distinctly Bobby Moran's sleepover party in like third grade, fourth grade, and I'd never seen wrestling or anything before. And they flipped it on, and I at the time I think he was beginning the program with Morocco. So it wasn't the famous cage match, but there was I just remember Don Morocco being there and
Right.
just thinking this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like these just larger than life humans, and I wanted like Morocco to die. It was like a very underrated heel, by the way,
Oh,
very
very
underrated in
underrated.
the history of
Yes.
wrestling. Um, and years later, and I digress, but I went to a signing with Morocco and Snuka, and it was like such a
Oh, that's
like
amazing.
mark out moment to meet the two of them at the same time. But yeah, it was Jimmy Snuka for me. He was so exciting, and you'll probably hear me talk a lot about storytelling because the one thing today's wrestling, I remember when Snuka wrestled Piper and Snuka did the dive over the top rope onto him, and it wasn't a spot. It was because Jimmy hated Roddy so much that he didn't care if he died doing this, but he was going to kill Roddy. And that was what really drew me in. What made me a Hulk Hogan fan was actually there was a documentary that they showed on Rocky 3. I believe it was CBS. I'm not 100% sure. But the funny thing was, I actually found clips from that documentary and I tweeted Hogan and he tweeted me back. And I was like,
Oh, wow.
yes. He's like, that's a rare find, brother. And I was like, Hogan called me brother. I'm good. But I remember like watching, I think if I'm not mistaken, in that he actually injured Stallone because I think Stallone, being a sucker for realism, was always like, just go and
Right.
we'll see what happens. In fact, I think what's face Dolph Lundgren sent him to the hospital because he punched him in the chest. And
Yes, that's right.
so they like that was Stallone. And so Stallone was kind of telling the story, and then they cut to Thunder Lips, and he was just like, well, when the lights get on, brother, and I need it. And I was like, holy shit, this is the greatest human being I've ever seen in my life. Like, and he was in full on Hogan mode. And it was just, I have to watch this guy. And it was like right when, the train was coming out of the station. So it was a
Yeah.
great time to decide, hey, I want to be a wrestling fan. So yeah, it was funny because I didn't see it when it happened, but I remember just thinking as a kid, this guy must be champ. But then hearing that Hogan beat the Iron Sheik and won the title, was like, oh, okay, so he wasn't champ before.
Right.
And the biggest thing was really because I don't even remember when we got cable, but it was finally watching WrestleMania 1 that really just put me on board as being just a full-fledged Hulkamaniac.
Yeah. Yeah. It started for me. Like, I was in the wrestling late 70s. So I remember him fighting Andre as a heel
Okay.
uh back in 79, 80. Didn't think much of him. Then I started, obviously I was a big wrestling magazine fan, the Aftermags, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Inside Wrestling. And I followed Hogan there where you could see the groundswell of Hulkamania kind of start there in AWA, where he was getting shots at Nick Bockwinkel and he would win, but then they would reverse the decision and he would never get the title. And there was just this groundswell of this guy's got to be the next champion. And then next thing I know, in December of 83, Backlund loses the title to Sheik. And I think it was the next week on television. It was supposed to be Bob Backlund and a mystery partner against the Wild Samoans. And then he brings out Hulk Hogan, and I couldn't believe it. I just like, oh my God, Hogan's back in the. I gotta watch this, and that's what got me. And I actually watched that Hogan Sheik match live.
Oh wow.
Living in Louisiana at the time, the MSG matches used to be broadcast on the USA Network.
And by the way, not to interrupt, but to the Sheik
Oh yes, to the Sheik, absolutely,
recently.
definitely. Here's to you. So that's how I remember, and from then on, I've just been on the Hulk Hogan train since. Uh, and so that's our topic today: top five Hulk Hogan matches. And Ken, we're going to start with you at number five, and then we'll go to me at number five, and we'll start there. So, what would your number five Hulk Hogan match be?
I gotta say, before I get into five, this was tough. This is a
Yes,
tough one
very.
because there's so many, and again, you're gonna hear me say storytelling a lot here
I'm
because
with you.
my biggest gripe, the one thing I can't stand, honestly, is the in ring moniker that people say. Well, Hogan was great, but he wasn't in ring. Wrestling's about storytelling.
Yes.
Period. Now, if you're gonna tell a story jumping off the top rope, or you're gonna tell a story going, you tell the story. Hogan was a masterful storyteller in and out of the ring. So don't tell me he wasn't good in ring. He told stories in the ring. That's
And
what
that
you're supposed to do.
right. And not to interrupt you, Ken, but for people who want to see in ring ability, go watch his Japanese
Yes,
matches with
yes.
Stan Hansen. You'll see a much different Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. Like recently, actually, and I didn't put it because I didn't want it's like I'm not going to give in to the smart marks, but I did watch some of his stuff in Japan. I watched his match with Muda. And
Right.
you see like a very different Hulk Hogan. And if Hogan is able to tell a story, even for myself being in the ring, like I learned a lot from Hogan. I did a whole match once gimmicking my beard, where I just kept yelling at the ref like he's pulling my beard. I was a heel, and the face
Right.
like I didn't touch it, and then he pulled it in front of the ref. We just did this whole thing. I had a valet fixing it, and the crowd was like eating out of the palm of our hands. So like, why begrudge someone if Hogan's able to tell a story by shaking and hulking up and getting the crowd louder than anybody else? Then why is he not good in ring?
Right.
Why is the guy that's doing like 100 flips in the ring better because he can do 100 flips?
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell me when the crowd's hotter, and that's always bothered me. Hogan's
Yeah.
great in the ring.
Same here, Ken. And Kevin Nash on his podcast, I think a couple of years ago, that he was underrated in the fact that you know he never hurt anybody. He was like wrestling Hogan was like wrestling like you were wrestling air, which was one of the great compliments you can have because didn't have to fear about getting hurt. You didn't have to fear about it was about the crowd, like you said, about the storytelling. And you're right, Ken, is that he is so underrated in the ring that it's almost criminal because he is great in the ring.
Yeah. So
So
so it was tough because like the things I didn't put on kind of struck me.
yeah,
WrestleMania 19 with Vince didn't quite make my top five. Again, great. A story that was told in real life for decades when it finally culminated in the ring. I didn't put WrestleMania 1 as important as that was. It was tough for me not to put that on the list.
yeah,
And I was trying to get to a place where there weren't all WrestleMania matches. I will say this, highly recommend. There's a new documentary out on Cyndi Lauper called Let the Canary Sing.
okay.
I actually got to go to the premiere of it, which was great. She does a big chunk of that documentary on wrestling,
Oh, I
which I
can't. I
was
have
I
to
was
check it out.
really happy that she acknowledged that and acknowledged how important wrestling was. It was literally, which I didn't realize, but it was they both needed each other.
Yeah,
Cindy was like really on the verge of blowing up, but hadn't quite blown up yet. And wrestling, obviously Vince needed her for WrestleMania 1. So they do a good chunk of the documentary on her getting into wrestling and how it helped her career. And it was like one of the most important matches in the history of wrestling. But it didn't make my list, which was really difficult. So I will say my number five is 1998 Nitro, Hogan Goldberg.
good one. Okay.
Um, Again, the whole idea of storytelling, man, and people love to, oh my God, it should have been a pay-per-view. Who cares? Who cares? You gave it to the fans for free on a Monday night, and it's when you talk about Hogan and the haters love to talk about he never put anyone over. So he was always politicking for himself. I've been in wrestling locker rooms. I find me a wrestler that's not politicking for himself.
Right.
If he was better at it than you are, stop it. Like, of course he was looking out for himself. But when you think about the Goldberg character and trying to figure out where they're going to go, and they got this streak going, and obviously ending the streak, they dropped the ball. There aren't many pops you will hear that's bigger than the pop when Goldberg gets Hogan up in the jackhammer.
Yes.
And even being a Hogan fan, I was watching it on TV, and it was thrilling just to, you could feel the energy coming through the screen. And that, that whole era, the NWO Hogan, again, the Bash at the Beach, one of the best promos, not the best promo ever. To be Hollywood, to, I did it for the money and all that stuff. I mean, it was such a great character. And again, if you want to say not a technical masterpiece, sure. Goldberg has his limitations, as well. They told a story, man. They told that story in the ring. They got the crowd hot, and that's what you do. That's the job. And so that comes in at number 5 for me.
That's a great number 5, Ken. And you're right about, who cares if it was on TV or pay-per-view. Back then, it was about ratings. It wasn't about pay-per-view buys. It was about ratings with Bischoff. And it was just a perfect storm, right? I mean, they had it at the Georgia Dome. That's where Goldberg was from.
Right.
So that's what drew 40,000 people. Unfortunately they messed this up, but the story was going to be Hogan getting the title back from Goldberg. He was supposed to be the one that ended the streak, and then things happened and whatever. But you're right, that match, from a fan standpoint, I mean, that crowd's on their feet the entire time, and you have some chicanery going on. Kurt Hennig comes out, and Karl Malone and DDP come out with with the chairs and stuff like that. But like you said, when Goldberg puts him up in that jackhammer, you can't get a lot of pop than that. And that's a great number 5. So my number 5 is probably, people are going to say that, to me, it's the most important wrestling match in the history of wrestling, and that's Hulk and Andre WrestleMania 3. Is a technical masterpiece? No. Is a cluster? At times. But I just remember, Ken, as a 17-year-old kid who loved Hogan so much, I was worried going into that match he was going to lose the title. And I just remember sitting on the edge of my seat watching WrestleMania, thinking to myself, how is Hogan even going to get this guy off his feet? And just any little offense that Hogan even put on was like, oh my God, here we go. Oh, here we go. He's got, and then Andre would thwart him. Again, Andre had most of the control for most of the match. You remember the controversy at the beginning of the match with Joey Morella, where, Andre, Hogan tries to slam Andre, Andre falls in. There's a controversial possible 3 count. But that story of that match, I thought, was perfectly played. Hogan played the perfect face in that match where he's trying to come from behind. And again, I know it's clunky. I think Meltzer even gave it -1 star. Poo poo. I don't give a crap, because you know what? All I know is 93,000 people in that building was on the edge of their seats. And even though Ricky Steamboat Savage stole that show, when they came out of that building that night, all they were talking about was Hogan beating Andre. And that's why, to me, that's number 5. And that slam of Andre, to me, even now, how many years later, wherever it's been, that is still the greatest moment in WrestleMania history, and you can't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, no, it's a good. I mean, I have that at number 3 on my list. So
Okay, so
moving on
we'll talk more about that.
this way we can talk a little more. You want me to talk now, or should I wait till
Yeah,
I get to
we'll get to it. Once we get to number 3, we'll talk more about
Okay,
that.
cool.
But
So
yes,
my number
that's number
4.
5. So let's get to you number 4.
My number 4, and again, the whole Hogan doesn't put people over. Hogan Lesnar, SmackDown,
Oh wow, good one.
'02. When you look back on that match, and again, Hogan being the master storyteller, the groundswell for Hulkamania at the time was pretty big. It was he after WrestleMania 18.
Yeah.
Right. So he finally went back to the red and yellow. There was, this feel, Hogan's back, and Hogan was going against the monster, and there were just times in that match you just felt like Hulkamania is going to do it. It's going to vanquish the beast, and he didn't. And I remember the image that sticks in my head is Lesnar taking his blood and putting it across his chest.
Great
And I
point.
say, even till today, the beast, the whole thing, that this conquering animal that Lesnar is. To a lot, I look back on that moment when you take a Hulk Hogan who is, the ultimate power in the universe, and this beast came in and
Right.
beat him at his best. And I fully expected when I was started watching that match that Hogan was going to win.
Hmm.
I just seen the story and everything they did leading up to that and going into it was Hulkamania is going to run wild. And when it didn't, and how it didn't, that not only did he beat him, but he left like the immortal Hulk Hogan bloodied and battered in the ring. Um, just did a lot for putting that Lesnar character over. So that comes in at my number 4.
Yeah, that's a great one, Ken. And you mentioned Hogan was kind of like on an upswing after WrestleMania. Like you say, he went back to the red and yellow, and he won the title. I think in April, beating Triple H. So, there was still a groundswell of Hogan, kind of like, oh my God, here we go again, another, a way of Hogan to be on the top. And you're right. I remember watching that match, and like my eyes were like wide open, like, oh my God, like I've never seen Hogan beat up like that.
Yeah.
I've never seen Hogan bleed like that. And almost, I'm not gonna say it was a squash match because it wasn't, because Hogan did have his moments, but it was like I've never seen Hogan be like that. That's crazy. And it's funny because Brock has done that not only to Hogan but to Undertaker, to Cena. So that was kind of like the start. And to me, as I was a fan of Brock as soon as he came in to WWE. But that match to me, and you talk about the match with The Rock at SummerSlam, but before that, that match with Hogan to me was the upswing for Brock.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the term beat up. Like you
Right.
never saw, we've seen Hogan beaten, we've seen Hogan get pinned. We've seen, one of the most, again, storytelling, one of the most masterful storytelling, Hogan versus Warrior kicks out at 3.5.
Right. Right.
I love that. Kicks out at three
Yes.
and a half. So he's just telling everyone, character's still alive. Warrior may
Yes.
have won here, but Hulkamania is still there. Lesnar, he was beat up.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, oh my God, is he going to survive? It was like that sort
Right.
of. I remember when Kurt Angle beat him in the ankle lock, and it wasn't like Hogan was beat up; he lost.
Right.
This match, he was really. You didn't see the red and yellow get beat up often, and he was beaten.
And I think, and I could be wrong with this. I think that was the last time we saw him until the McMahon feud in '03, the following year. I think that was the last time we saw him on TV because, like I said, I actually thought that was the end for Hogan. I thought like he's not going to see him for a while, and sure enough, we did.
Right.
So, all right, my number 4 is a WrestleMania match, and to me, they had unbelievable chemistry, and that's Hogan Savage from WrestleMania 5. Um, you go back to watch their matches when Savage was Intercontinental Champion in '86. There's matches they had on the house shows at the Garden. They're
Yeah.
unbelievable. They had some
Yeah.
great matches. I love this match obviously because of the story. Like you talked about the story. I mean, what better story than Hogan Savage and Elizabeth? The triangle of love. Even though the I love her like a sister. It's like So it was just I that story, and that was a over 1 year story told. Started at Saturday Night's main event when he came in to save Savage from the Honky Tonk Man, the Heart Foundation. So I started there. I think that was in October of '87. And then all of a sudden, here we are, March of '89, culminating in this WrestleMania 5 match. And what I love about the match, Ken, is that if you watch that match, Hogan tries to out wrestle Savage early on, tries to frustrate him. He's doing drop leg toe holds, he's doing arm bars, he's doing all kinds of stuff that's not like Hogan. And that kind of like, you can see it frustrates Savage. And Savage then becomes violent and it actually busts open Hogan. And I just love the way that story is told. I like the fact that they threw Elizabeth out of the building, and then it's just them two. She's not a deterrent anymore. It's those two guys going at it. I just love that match. I love everything they've done in WWF, but to me, that match is fantastic. And again, storytelling, like you talked about, to me, there's nothing more storytelling than Hogan Savage during that time in '89. And also remember too, WrestleMania 5 was the most watched WrestleMania, even more than Hogan Andre. It was the most watched WrestleMania at the time.
Mhm.
between Hogan and Savage. That
I've never
shows you
seen
that shows you how great that story was.
That's tremendous. And I think that'll be on my list at some point too. So
Good.
we'll
All
talk
right,
further.
let's get to number three.
But number three, Hogan Andre for me.
Okay, cool.
Hogan Andre. I mean, you could make the case for being the most important match ever in wrestling.
No doubt.
Again, storytelling wise, if you want, if you're watching this now, rewind it, drink every time we say storytelling. It'll be a fun drinking game for you. Um,
I'll drink.
but again, same what you said. Is it a great match in ring? Can it get a little wonky at times, a little clunky, like you said? Yeah, but everything like leading up to it, the Piper's Pit, where and when you look at WrestleMania 3, Roddy Piper's the unsung hero of that event.
Mhm.
Between helping to tell the story between Hogan and Andre, plus his own storyline. He put in work to get that show over. But everything with that, and when people talk about wrestling and they criticize it, I mean, I remember, and coincidentally, the cross cuts him. It's like it's perfect.
I know, I
And
know.
Piper just touching his chest, going, "You're bleeding." It's like, oh, the drama. And then Hogan, this big, visceral 24-inch pythons, is just a broken man
Mhm.
at that point. And then he comes on Piper's Pit, I think the following week. And it's, Piper just, well, you're not face on it. He's like, yes. And they cut to the crowd. And I remember there's this one guy who just like, and it's like this, like, it's not a kid. It's this
No.
middle-aged guy just like, that's what like people don't realize. Like, and it's so tough with wrestling, especially, that if you didn't live through it, to
Right.
go back, you just don't get the same feel. And much like you were saying, man, I was a Hulkamaniac. There were times where, is he gonna lose? Like, could he lose? I think Hogan himself thought, could I lose? Like,
Right.
will Andre
Right.
let me go over? And I love the fact that even the wonky like near pin controversy in the beginning of the match, it's almost like it kind of follows over to Saturday night's main event when he loses the belt, when he does kick out, but
Yeah.
they count the three, kind of, how much for the plastic surgery, brother? But the storytelling is just so masterful.
It
And
is.
when you watch it again, I mean, when he picks up Andre, it's just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, it's, I hate the marks that are just, oh, it's not the best body slam. I'm like, you lift up Andre. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
Jesus Christ, he
Right.
lifted Andre.
And listen, and WWE likes to tell lies. We get that. He was slammed before. He had been beaten
Yes,
before.
yes.
We get all that.
But that
However,
was probably the biggest Andre to get. I mean,
right,
he
exactly.
was a lot bigger
Yes,
then.
exactly. That was my point. Absolutely. I mean, just all you gotta do is look at the crowd when he has him up.
Yeah,
It's just, oh my
yeah.
God. Like I just couldn't believe it. And you're so right, Ken. Like the storytelling leading that match. And that's what it's about. It's just storytelling, man. It's just like you talked about the Piper's Pit. I remember the contract signing where
Yes.
Hogan's just staring at, just staring at him,
Yeah.
and then Andre talks in French.
Yes.
You talk to me
Yes.
in you talk to me in English. Oh, it's just unbelievable. And just unfortunately these days, listen, right now I'm totally into the bloodline angle. So
Yes. But that's great
so
storytelling.
the
It's great
storytelling, right?
storytelling.
And what's everybody talking about? The blood angle. They're not talking
Yeah.
about a 450. They're not talking about Hana
No.
Karana. They're talking about the bloodline angle, what's going on right now. And back in the 80s, everything that Hogan did storytelling wise was 100% perfect.
Yeah, and because you gave it room to breathe. Where I
Yes.
think a lot of things get rushed. The bloodline's giving room to breathe.
Right.
Right, going from the like early on when they brought the Samoans in, like how they started the tribal chief thing, and they let it all develop. They didn't give you all of it at once, and that's what we got like back in the day often, that they let stories breathe, and
Yep.
you were able to develop the story. And so you want to sit there and say, oh, it's a -1 match, whatever. The storytelling from the beginning with the trophy. Remember the trophies
Oh yeah.
where Hogan gets the
He got a
trophy for
smaller
being
trophy.
champ and Andre gets a smaller trophy. And then you have Heenan, who's the heel, but saying things like, as an audience member, like he's working in the gray. he's not going black or white. He's
No,
pointing out that Andre's undefeated and his trophy's smaller. Why is his trophy smaller? And that was something where, as a fan, you're like, yeah, I don't like Bobby, but he's got a point.
right.
He's kind of right there. And so when he comes out with Andre on Piper's Pit, it's like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
oh, why are you here with him, brother? So good.
I know it's so good.
Uh,
I can go back and watch it 100 million times. Everything leading up to it. That's a great number three. And I love everything about that match and that storyline. My number three, again, another WrestleMania match, and that's WrestleMania 6 with Ultimate Warrior. Um, talk about the Toronto crowd, that Toronto crowd, and I'm sure we'll get into the Toronto crowd even later into the countdown, but that crowd again was just so psyched for that match. And that was a match where it was literally 50-50. Now, I was not a Warrior fan, I was a Hogan guy. So, I liked Warrior, but I wanted my guy Hogan to beat him. But when those two guys get together, remember, when did you see Hogan face another face? You didn't.
right.
So this was the first time that Hogan was kind of like going against a guy that people were cheering for. It was always, all right, let's turn against Hogan. Let's have him backstab Hogan. This wasn't that. This
Mm.
was mano a mano, world champion against intercontinental champion, winner take all. And that's what I love about that storyline. It all started kind of at the Survivor Series where they kind of teamed up and they were kind of getting a little friendly. And then they had that little meeting at the Royal Rumble where they were in the ring together and kind of got went at it. And then WrestleMania comes about, and my God, just like again, what high spots are in that match? There is none. It's two guys with the test of strength. The Warrior, which I couldn't believe, press slamming Hogan above his head, you know, and then when Hogan missed that leg drop, Ken, he never missed a leg drop,
Right.
never. It had been 6 years. Every time he went for the leg drop, he hit it. And when he missed that leg drop and Warrior splashed him and got the pin, we could talk about top five shocking moments. That to me is in the top five because I never thought in a million years that the Warrior could beat Hogan. And sure enough, there he did. And that was the start where Jesse Ventura at the end of the match called him the immortal Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, the match didn't actually make my list.
Okay.
But there's a lot. I mean, I see. Again, it was so tough. It was so tough,
Yeah, of
like
course.
whittling down
There's
my
no right
top
or wrong
five.
answers.
Yeah,
It's just opinions. Yeah.
but it was face versus face, which is exciting. Warrior was obviously the guy that was like the up and coming guy. But I love even you can call it backstage politicking or whatever. But in missing the leg drop, he protected the leg drop.
Yes.
And I
Good point.
love that stuff. And I love like I said earlier, the kick out at 3.5.
Yes.
That he lost, he wasn't beaten. And
Right.
so Hogan had a keen awareness of I might be back. So we'll put Warrior over, but we're not gonna put him over. We're
Right.
gonna
Right.
that it was within this of Hogan winning the match. And that was the story that Hogan told, that he lost the match.
Right.
He just was a hair not as good as the Warrior that day.
Right.
Which I love, that like protecting of the character. And you can say that's backstage, whatever. I don't care. Like, you protect yourself, and he's the GOAT because he protected his character and everything. So but again, masterful storytelling, whether you believe the stories or not, as far as Warrior presumably being blown up early in the match and Hogan having to call everything or whatever you want to, maybe that happened, maybe it didn't, maybe it's just tall tales, but Hogan did what he could to put Warrior over.
Yeah, listen, was it passing the torch at the time?
Yeah, it was.
Unfortunately, Warrior didn't take that torch and go with it. He basically took that torch and blew up his career.
Yeah.
But that wasn't Hogan's fault. Hogan got him over, and it was Warrior's job to kind of ascend to Hogan's level, which he never did. And unfortunately, they had to go back to Hogan the following WrestleMania. So,
Yeah, I mean, when you think about, like, I mean, you say it like torching his career. When you think about that moment that you're in the 80s, in the midst of Hulkamania, and Hulk Hogan puts you over.
Mm-hmm.
And the WWE, not too long after that, has to resort to turning Slaughter heel and giving an aging Slaughter the title to bring the All-American hero Hogan back to put the title back on
Yep.
him. The Warrior could have been huge.
Yeah,
That was his
absolutely.
moment. He could have been huge. He could have ran with that. I'm not going to say he would have been another Hogan, but I think he's someone who could have been in the main event picture for quite a long time after that.
Absolutely.
And like I think that's a good he torched his career.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got the number two. What we got, Ken?
Well, number two is Hogan Macho. So we're back to that WrestleMania
Okay, cool.
5. So we get to talk about that again.
Nice.
I mean, everything you said, but I love, I listened to Pritchard's podcast when he talked about this, and I love how he just kind of we stuck in a look here or a gesture there, like that Macho Man wasn't turning on Hogan yet, and maybe the audience didn't pick up on it at all, but early on, like Hogan would give Elizabeth a hug, and we just would have Macho Man just look over with like maybe a little look of disdain, just to kind of plant the seeds for a year until they got to WrestleMania 5. And I think that's so brilliant. And when the two of them finally got in the ring and it was the Mega Powers explode, and when you look at the stuff behind the scenes, these guys probably were very much like brothers. At times didn't get along like brothers, that happens, and at times they were close. But that they had a certain chemistry in the ring that, different styles, but they worked well together. And it was a big deal for the Mega Powers to explode. And Macho Man, for as much as he was giving up in size, he was so good that you kind of thought he might beat Hogan. And again,
Yeah.
it was so rare because Hulkamania was so strong. And I think that's when you talk about masterful storytelling, that even though Hogan was always going over, there were these moments where you're like, ooh, is Hogan going to lose?
Right.
And then he'd pull it out. But, Macho Man was a legit contender to beat Hogan, even though there was that size disparity. And Styles and Macho Man as a heel was just brilliant. The promos were brilliant with the two of them. Just being that angry, jealous husband. Mach did that so well, which is probably tied to the real Randy
Right.
Poffo. So that's probably why he did it so well. But yeah, just all of it was so masterfully done, leading into the culmination at WrestleMania 5. So that makes my number two.
Let me ask you this, and I don't know if it was Pritchard's podcast, or maybe another podcast. I think there was talk of maybe turning Hogan heel and having Savage stay babyface. Do you think that works? Would have worked at the time?
It's tough to say because they're both so good.
Right.
So my gut reaction is no.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
But they're so good. Like if they did that, maybe they would have figured out a way to make it work. But the jealous husband angle to me is what made. And Elizabeth was so hot.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, when Elizabeth came out, I mean, I remember. Do you remember when Macho Man was going through like his managers, and he was
Yes.
the big
Yes.
free agent,
Yeah.
and he had Fuji was after him, Heenan, I think Freddie Blassie was
Yeah.
in the ring.
Johnny V. Let's just Johnny
Johnny
V.
V,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Macho Man went through all of them on like how much he admired them, but he wasn't going to go with them. And then Elizabeth comes out, and like every guy who's a wrestling fan was like, oh,
Yeah. Right.
like she was gorgeous. And so to have her in the mix, and I think that's like one of the things as a heel that you kind of, when you tell a story like that, you can garner a certain level of empathy that I think really works for a storyline like that, because there are a lot of us fellas that will look at our woman, and if there's a guy getting a little too close or a little too huggy, you're like, all right, we're buddies, but motherfucker, getting a little too close.
But
And I think a lot of guys can empathize with that.
yeah, my favorite part is when Savage was trying to show like evidence, and there was a point where Savage lifts up Elizabeth, and Hogan puts his hand on Elizabeth's
Yes,
head.
yes.
But but is she what she's doing there? No, but he's trying to like make sure she doesn't fall. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the storytelling back in those days is just it's perfect. Unbelievable. So my number two is kind of out of the box here. So there was a match that I saw when I don't want to say 18, 19. I actually went back a couple days ago to make sure it was as good as I remember. And it was. It's March 18th, 1989. It's not a WrestleMania. It's not a Saturday Night's main event. It was a house show at the Garden. And it was Hogan Boss Man inside of a steel cage at Madison Square Garden. Now, they do this match 2 months later, I think in May at Saturday Night's main event, which was another steel cage match. But this match is 10 times better. This match is where it's a violent match. Boss Man's bleeding literally 2 minutes into the match. By the end of the match, his face is covered in a crimson mask. Back then, you didn't see a lot of blood in matches. I mean, this was violent. And what was great about this match, Boss Man sold. Boss Man to me was a very underrated big man.
Oh, yeah.
Who could bump around like a 220-pound guy, and that's what he did for Hogan here. And there's a spot in this match, Ken, where again, I think they did it at Science Man event, but to me it was more spectacular at the Garden, where Hogan superplexes Boss Man off the top of the cage. And I'm
Oh,
looking, I'm
wow.
like, oh my God, what just happened here? You never saw Hogan. And Hogan was very vicious in this match. And it was just, and Slick is an underrated performer in this match. He bumps like Bobby Heenan in this match. He gets into the ring. Hogan beats him up. I implore you to go back and watch. It's on YouTube. I go back and watch this match. This match is incredible. It did set, like I said, this set up another one for Science Man event, but there's no blood in that match. It's not as violent. They do a superplex spot in that match, but it's not as spectacular as the one at the Garden. The Garden crowd goes crazy for that superplex spot. To me, that match is incredible. To me, like I said, I was watching a couple of days ago. It's not only my number two, I would say it might be my favorite cage match of all time.
Wow. That's some high praise. Yeah, I honestly I don't know if I've seen it. I'm sorry.
Please
I will
go back and watch
definitely
it and let me know
find
what
it.
you think.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely find it. Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback, I mean, I haven't seen it, so I can't really talk about the match, but I will say, like Boss Man, another guy. I mean, we talked a little bit about Morocco before, but Boss Man, another guy, really underrated. You're right, can take a bump. Really sold for the guys who really good heel.
Right.
Um,
And what's crazy about this match, Ken, is that it's March 18th, 1989. It's 2 weeks before WrestleMania.
oh my
So
God.
he's got this epic match coming up with Savage, and yet this match with Bossman is as violent as you can be, and they're doing this crazy spot, and I think it was Shabani's podcast. Hey, it was Shabani because Shabani, it's Tony Shabani and Lord Alfred Hayes on the call,
Oh
and
wow.
Tony Shabani said on his podcast that was the greatest night of his life because what happened was they were in Boston. Hogan and Bossman did a match in Boston at 3 o'clock, and then went to the Garden and did this match at 8.
Oh wow.
So though he announced both matches, and Schiavone said that was the greatest night of my professional life. And you remember Schiavone did the first Starcade, did all kinds of other things, and he said that night was the greatest night of my life because I was at the two most epic arenas that you can think of in the Boston Garden and MSG, seeing Hogan versus Bossman.
Wow. All right, I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, let me know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because probably because it was a house show, I didn't get to see a violent Hogan
No,
often.
no.
You
And like I
didn't
said,
see that.
yeah, and that match always stuck in my mind, Ken. Like it had been years since I've seen that match. I'm like, all right, is this really top five material? Let me go back and watch it. And I went back and watched it. I'm like, it's more than top five material. It's like in my top three. That's how good this match was.
Definitely will go check that out.
Yes. All right, we're here. Number
Number
one. What we
one.
got?
And it's funny because I think we're going to be tied because I
I think
haven't
so
heard this
too.
match yet. Um, yeah, Hogan Rock.
Yeah.
Hogan Rock,
Yeah.
WrestleMania 18. Just brilliant all the way around. I loved the NWO and WCW. We all know where it went over time, but when the NWO was hot, it was so good. It was just so good. Maybe my favorite era. I'm partial to the 80s with wrestling, but oh man, when everything with the NWO early on was just so good.
Yes.
And and when Vince swiveled his chair and he's got NWO on the back of the chair, like,
Poison.
yeah, like and the internet's in its infancy then, like you're not getting these spoilers. I have no idea like Hogan or anything's coming to the WWE or the WWF at that point. I don't know, but I have no idea that they're coming. And I see that I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And
And it was great. It was just those three guys. It wasn't like,
yes,
Vincent. It wasn't, Michael Wall Street. It was those three guys who initially started it.
yeah, absolutely. And when they came in, that initial promo with The Rock, with like backstage, and The Rock is like Big Daddy Diesel, and that whole, it's just it. I mean, The Rock was so good, but Hogan played his part masterfully. One of the greatest moments I've ever witnessed, and it reminds me. And I try to do this sometimes when I wrestle, to use like silence sometimes can be so, if you use it the right way. And one of the things I remember seeing a Michael Jackson documentary, and someone talking about him and saying like Michael would come out on stage and just posture. He would just stand.
Mm.
And you'd hear the crowd get louder and louder and louder. And he had this, just this such a, he was so in tune with the crowd that just that like that millisecond where it may have died down, Michael would just grab his sunglasses and put his hand here, and people would be passing out in the front row. And he's not doing anything,
Right.
but he is working that crowd. And sometimes for myself, like when I go to the ring, like as a heel, I'll like find a kid in the crowd and I stop and I'll just stare at him. I don't do that indie heel stuff, like just yelling at people. I'll just find someone and I wait for the boos to get louder and louder, because the kid's like just asking for a high five, and I just stare at him in disdain. So there's a value to learning how to use silence. And when you see the promo before WrestleMania, when Rock challenges Hogan and they stand there in silence, and you hear the crowd, Rocky, 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 Hogan, Hogan,
Mhm.
Hogan. And they're so brilliant that they know enough to just pump the brakes and let the crowd just go. And then they break the silence right at the right time. And then the brilliance of the two of them, where they borderline, try to commit homicide on The Rock before WrestleMania. I mean, they hit him in the back of the head with a hammer. They crash his ambulance. I mean, they do everything to just make The Rock the biggest face in the world, and Hogan just the most evil. I mean, everything he did in WCW as a heel probably paled in comparison to
Right.
when they tried to kill The Rock, you know? And then they get to Mania, and the crowd is, I mean, if not 100%, I mean, it's pretty
Oh,
close early in that match that it's a 90% pro Hogan crowd.
I think you're
And
being kind.
yeah, and what they do though, which is the brilliance of the two of them in that ring, and an older Hogan who comes out there and says, "Yeah, I'm Hulk Hogan, motherfucker, and
Right.
and I'll work a crowd. Y'all might be half my age in the back. I will show you guys how to work a crowd." And the brilliance of the two of them, where they don't change, like Hogan doesn't go full on face, Rock doesn't go full on heel, but they sprinkle in. So they
Yes.
kind of maintain where they're supposed to be, but they like Rock gets a little more of an edge. Hogan plays with the crowd a little bit, but they still adhere to Rock is still primarily the face, and Hogan's primarily the heel. And when Rock wins, the crowd pops. It is just, if you're a wrestler, really, if you want to see masterful storytelling, sit and just watch that match
Yep.
over and over and over again. The pacing is brilliant. The looks, how they use silence, how they use when they're not engaged physically, how they look at the crowd, everything in that match is borderline perfect. It's long for a prototypical Hogan match. Hogan never looks gassed. It's just top to bottom. It is storytelling 101. For me, it's honestly like it's a difficult thing for me not to take a Hogan from the golden age and put it at number one, but I can't.
Right.
It's just it's brilliant all the way around, top to bottom. It's two of the best to ever do it, being at their best. I mean, I don't know if I'd have to really think about it, but I don't know if The Rock ever showed me better storytelling than in that match as well. They were just two masters telling stories, maybe the Austin matches, but this might be my best for him. It's just masterful storytelling with the two of them. I really, there's not, I have in my, this is, I guess, my study room now, my office, like I have a WrestleMania 18 poster up in here. It's just, and when I think of storytelling, I think of that match and how, I mean, it was beautiful. It really
Yeah,
was just beautiful. Like what, that was one of those things where if you want to call wrestling an art form, and I think you should, that's art.
yeah,
That was art. That was performance art. That was two masters of their crafts showing the world, this is how you do it.
yeah.
This is how you entertain a crowd. This is how you get people amped. And it should have been the main events, because goddamn, I would not want to be the person that had to follow that
No,
match.
yeah, you
But
felt
just
bad for Triple
brilliant.
H and Jericho. You felt bad for him.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
just brilliant, brilliant all the
Yeah,
way around.
yeah. Well, listen, that's my number one too. And you said so many great things there, Ken. Just like it felt like, even though there was, there's wrestling fans like me and you, there were just a lot of fans who were just WWF fans who remember Hogan red and yellow. So when I remember when he first arrived there, again, like you said, he was supposed to be the heel. They're chanting his name in his first ever promo because he's back. Like
Mhm.
he's back home. And like you said, which was so brilliant. They tried everything impossible to make Hogan the heel, trying to kill The
Yeah,
Rock. And no, 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 we still love Hogan.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so it's like no matter what they did, and you were right in the other sense in the fact that that match, yeah, you're right. It wasn't like Rock turned full face heel. Hogan didn't turn, face, but they did little things where, they were booing Rock, and then Hogan and Rock would go, like this to the crowd,
Yeah, yeah.
or and then Hogan NWO. When did you ever see him Hulk up during the NWO? You never did, but that time you did when he kicked out of the Rock Bottom the first time. He kicked out, and the crowd goes crazy.
And
Uh,
to add to that, the brilliance of The Rock, because The Rock didn't have to, but when he was hulking up, The Rock was
yeah, yeah,
like
right,
the
right.
Rock had that the panic of a heel.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
and so he, like, the give and take there was so great to see, where, and he was The Rock. The
yeah,
Rock didn't have to, but he gave Hogan that, all right, he's hulking up. What do you do when Hogan hulks up? You shit, he's
right,
hulking up. And
right.
he sold for the hulking up. It's just so good.
It is, and Bully Ray calls it the greatest match of all time. You can debate that no matter what, and he always says on the show, just listen. You don't even have to watch the match, just listen. And that crowd, I don't think for a sustained match, for a match that long, I don't think there's a sustained crowd noise like that in any match I've ever seen in my life. We
That's a
talked
good point.
about,
Like sustained volume. Like you're
right,
right.
like
It's
like Hogan Andre, you were on the edge of your seat. Even Hogan Warrior, like, all right, what's gonna happen here?
yeah.
This match, they were on their feet the entire single time of this match, and that's why it's so brilliant. And it's
And
funny
that's what
because,
wrestling is.
right,
It doesn't have
exactly,
to be like an athletic, and I mean, I've always gone to Macho Man Steamboat as the
hmm,
best ever.
sure.
But if you're going to tell me Rock Hogan's the best ever, it's hard for me to argue
Oh,
against it.
yeah, you're right. I can't. And like Bully says sometimes, slow it down. And when you think you're too slow, slow it again. And that's what they did. It was like you said, they will look at each other. They will look at the crowd. They would look at whatever. And just like, it was just so brilliant. And then remember, Hogan just came back. So there were a lot of new faces in WWE at the time that didn't understand Hulk Hogan. And it was Joey Styles that I remember him saying, like, I was not a Hogan fan. Don't get it. Don't understand it. And then he said he saw that match, and his exact words after that match was, "Now I get it. Now I get it." And that's the brilliance of Hulk Hogan right there.
It
You
is. I
know?
mean, it was one of those things that, like, if you're a fan and you really, because I will get emotional. Like, I love seeing talent, like any sort of talent, and it might sound silly to get emotional during a wrestling match, but I would, because it's like these are two guys that are just brilliant at their craft,
Right.
and they're showing the world like how to do it. On the biggest stage that you could do it, that they're showing everybody, I am it. I am the best.
Hmm.
Like, prove otherwise, and they do it. And I wish the Rock is a global icon now, so good for him. I wish he had a longer stint in the WWE,
Me
and we could
too.
have seen, like, he probably could have been another Hogan and had, we may have never had a Cena if The Rock actually stayed around.
Hmm.
But hindsight's 2020, and look at what The Rock is now. So don't begrudge the guy. But that was definitely kind of a passing of the torch. But
Definitely.
it's a borderline perfect match. And again, Bully Ray says the best of all time. I don't know. Can I argue against it? I mean, if
No,
we're
you
really
can't.
sitting here saying wrestling's all about storytelling, that, and when they're in the ring and the story they're going to tell is changed on some levels because of the crowd, that they're masters, and they're able to roll with it. And the fact that, like I said earlier, that they're able to get to a place where the crowd pops when The Rock wins. Because we have gotten to a spot in wrestling, unfortunately, that a lot of crowds you see go into these arenas to hijack the show.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of crowds that nowadays take that match. Maybe they're just masters and they would do, but a lot of, like, smart marks would boo the outcome. If we were
Right.
all cheering for Hogan, so we're gonna boo now. But the brilliance of this match is that that crowd wanted Hogan to win.
No,
They loved Hogan,
yeah,
and
and you
they
never felt
popped.
right, and you never felt like they hijacked that match. They
No,
were
you never
just they
felt
were
like that.
just so into that match that they just popped for everything.
It was
And
beautiful.
yeah,
There
absolutely.
was
And it
there
was
was
funny.
beauty in it.
Yeah, it was funny is because I remember when Hogan first came on the scene. I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait. I want to see Hogan Austin. Hogan Austin wouldn't have worked here. Okay, and I don't think
No,
so because I think the crowd would have been 50-50. I don't think it would have been as rabid as they did for Hogan Rock because they wanted it was nostalgia, Ken. They
mhm.
wanted the Hogan from the 80s again. And they and in certain times that match, you got that from Hogan.
Yeah, and I do think there are times, and no disrespect, because I do think that, I said earlier, if you politic for yourself, good for you. I mean,
Right.
that's life. That's wrestling. I mean, I politic for myself all the time. It's you do that.
If you're not gonna do it, who's gonna do it
Who's
for you?
going to do it? And that's
Right.
kind of the attitude I've taken. Like, if no one else is going to look out for
Right.
me, but I do think there's a lot of, even from Austin himself, when you hear him talk, Austin looked out for Austin,
Yeah.
and I'm not
Absolutely.
begrudging him at all.
No.
But I'm saying that Austin,
Look what we do with Brock Lesnar. Walked out.
yes. So I don't know if Austin, you have The Rock, who, I mean, this might be a moment that someone who grew up, like someone who, like, at birth was in the business,
Mm.
that's the sort of level of immersion you needed to handle that stress. I mean, think about it for a second. And anyone who's watching this and listening, or for you, that you've gone through, that you've been in writers' rooms, that you're backstage, you're talking to Vince, you're coming up with all, I'm the face, he's the heel, we're going, and then thousands of people decide, no, we hate you. Like, in that moment, like, you got to look at what The Rock did in that match and say, holy shit. Like, you went through all this preparation of being the face against the ultimate heel. That's what I don't know. As great as he was, I'm not saying he wasn't, as great as Austin was, I don't know if he's able to navigate that storm
That's such a
as well
brilliant
as The
point, Ken.
Rock was. I
Such a
think there's a
brilliant
little
point.
more ego,
Yeah.
where Austin would be looking to put himself over, no disrespect, where The Rock was putting the story and the match over. And that's the big difference. Rock was going to put the match over. And to me, that philosophy only comes from someone who was immersed in the business, that
Yeah.
he grew up in it. He knew that it was all about the match and the crowd. And it must have just, Hogan came out, crowd went nuts, and Rock was like, all right, I
Do something
shift
different.
gears.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
gotta do something different. Yeah,
And I don't know if Austin gets that. I don't know if
right,
Austin's able to do that. And you're
right.
right. I don't think it's the same experience.
Wow, that's a great point, and you're right. I mean, there's so many little intricacies in that match where it's like, all right, here we go. Rock is, and remember, Rock after that match, he did have the match with Brock Lesnar where he was booed again at SummerSlam, but that led this kind of started the heel Rock coming up in '03 where he fights Austin at WrestleMania and goes in his match against Goldberg. This was kind of like the launching point for Rock going heel in 2003.
Yeah,
So
and again, such a brilliant storyteller. One of those
yeah,
guys that could do the face or the heel thing. But like I said, I mean, in that moment, I can't imagine. Think about anything in your life that you've prepared months for, and you put in the work to prepare, and then whether it's a presentation, whether it's a radio show, whether it's like in the moment it happens, 100% turnaround.
hmm
Like everything you prepared for just went out the window, and in that moment in front of thousands that you have to figure out how to shift gears on the fly, and you have no one to ask. You don't have a coach. Things happen in sports. Hey, coach, what should we do?
yeah.
You're standing there in this ring, thousands of people. Shit, they took a hammer to the back of my head, and I'm getting booed. What do I do?
Right, right.
And
So
and
what?
Rock was they're just brilliant. It
Yeah,
really, there's not enough good you could say about this match. Like I said, any wrestler, you want to learn how to tell a story, watch this match. Watch this match 100 times.
yeah.
Just
It's
look at all the intricacies. Look at how they play with each other. Look at how they use silence. Look at when at the time when, like you said, when they slow it down,
mhm,
and how they're able to work it where the whole crowd pops at the end when the Rock wins, when the crowd did not want the Rock to win.
right.
And
Yeah,
that's just brilliance right there. With not a significant like heel turn or anything, that it's just they tell that story and the Rock wins, crowd pops, and then Rock's like, come back in here because Hogan must pose.
yeah. Because it's yeah, because it's funny because I did my Ric Flair matches with Dave LaGreca. I started from number five. Here, I start with number one. I'm like, I know this is my number one. It's not
It's
even
funny.
close.
When I was making the list, that's what I started with too.
Yeah, so it's tremendous. What's your top five Hulk Hogan matches? Please comment below, like, subscribe. Ken, anything you want to promote, your anything social media you want to promote, give them out, and I'll put it down below.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just follow me on Instagram at the Ken Reedy Show. That's best place to follow me. And yeah, check out yi.org. That's where I work. I help people with disabilities. Check out YI social media. We actually are very excited. Check out YI social media. I don't know when this is going to be posted, but we do have it's great, and you'll appreciate this, but we did bring in a professional puppeteer, and we have
Nice.
someone with a disability and someone who is neurotypical do a puppet improv show together, and to see neurotypical and someone with disabilities sharing the stage as equals is so cool.
Oh, that's
And for the
tremendous.
first time, we're going to simulcast it live on
Oh,
all of
wow.
YI's social media, on their Instagram and their Facebook, this coming Tuesday, July 11th. So if this posts after that, so be it. But check out their YI social media because the video will still be up there, and you'll see some really good stuff coming up.
Cool. And I'll make sure to retweet that as well. This will not be the last time you see Ken Reed because we have some other ideas.
Yes.
Just a little behind the curtain. I was always loved my favorite soundtrack was Purple Rain by Prince, but that was kind of like the only album I really ever heard. And I know Ken was a big Prince fan, so I started getting into discography. I cannot wait to start the top five Prince albums or top five Prince songs because I think we can have a good time with that one.
I think it's good. And it's so funny. Like, I mean, I don't know if you can get much different. It's like, Hulk Hogan matches, Prince,
Right.
like very, very, very different. But yeah,
Yes.
it's funny because when you approached me and I started thinking about that, as difficult as it was for me to look at my top five Hogan matches, I was like, oh damn. Like, I mean, because now that like you're into this discography, I mean, one of the most prolific songwriters ever. There's so many
Oh
albums. So
my
to come
God.
up with like a top five, it's like, And then I was like, do I cop out? Like these two are tied for 5. These two are tied for
Yeah.
just to
You
get
actually
more
do top
albums in.
10. Yeah.
But oh yeah, it was like I started brainstorming because I've been listening. I've been like re-experiencing. I know we got to close, but I've been re-experiencing kind of the teaser. Um, and you know, people watching the show, go listen to Prince.
Yes.
He's better than we remember, and he's
Oh
one
my
of the
God. That
few artists, actors, anything that like I'm going back and listening to stuff that I loved, and I'm listening to it like this is better than I remember it.
hmm
Like the intricacies and the harmonies, and knowing he's doing all the voices and the harmonies and playing all the instruments. I will close at this as a teaser. Go and listen to For You, the first song on his first album. And he does all the vocals. And he's a teenager when he recorded this.
Mm.
It might be the greatest first song on someone's debut album in the history of music, knowing that he did all the instruments and all the vocals. And it's stuff like that that I go back and listen to him like, holy shit, like he
Yes.
was, oh my God. Like and we're lucky we got to live through his era. Um, very sad what happened to him. It
hmm
broke me, but yeah, we'll have a lot to talk
Yeah, I
about.
can't wait because you've definitely opened my eyes, and just listening through his discography, it's been mind blowing. I can't wait to join that with you. So Ken, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And
Thank you.
guys, please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time on Top of the Hops.
Cheers.